Hey guys, this video is mainly for my church family, and I'll explain why here in a minute, but I thought put it on YouTube. There might be some other new shooters that might benefit from this as well, especially if you don't have a mentor that's kind of drilling this sort of information into you. So here's the backstory, is that over the past several weeks, couple of months, it feels like there's been a number of you that have approached me, said, hey, I want to get my first firearm, or I want to become more active in shooting, and I give you all the good stuff about shooting, and based on what you want, I kind of give recommendations and your budget and give you recommendations, and I'm super excited for you. That's all well and good. But then there's just been kind of this nagging feeling in the back of my head, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and I think I have finally figured it out. And that is, I tell you all the good things about owning a firearm, and there are many, but here's the thing I feel like I haven't told you is anything about how to make sure this firearm is safe in your home, that you use it safely, that it doesn't, something that you're so excited to get, your first handgun, and there's an accidental discharge, and it doesn't end well. And so I just want to go over 4 basic firearms rules that were kind of driven into me 40 plus years ago from my grandfather and my dad. I grew up hunting and shooting with, and they taught me how to shoot. And so I just want to go over them real quick, and I think that will ease my conscience. I remember also my dad in my early years, my teen years, he was a hunter's education instructor for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting is that each year he would get a summary of firearm accidents that happened, and they would kind of categorize them, give any backstory they could. And it was always alarming of how many accidents happened and injuries that happened, and even fatalities that happened from an accidental discharge. It was never intended. It's not supposed to happen. And so I want to make sure that doesn't happen in your home. And so I just want to pass on these 4 firearm safety rules. Also, I'll throw out this. I even know someone who had an accidental discharge and injured themselves pretty severely. And thankfully, they've recovered. But I want to make sure that doesn't happen in your home. So first and foremost, rule number 1 is never point a firearm at anything you do not intend or are not willing to destroy. The simplified version of that years ago was probably something like this. Always keep your firearm pointed in a safe direction. And all that makes perfect sense. But to me, the language, especially as an experienced shooter, when I'm reminded that this thing can be deadly. Maybe I didn't buy it to ever shoot at anyone but paper, and that's fine. But even if I never bought it for anything but paper, if I'm not careful, it can cause severe damage or worse. Now some may say, well, the safety's on, it doesn't really matter, my firearm is made safe. Doesn't matter. I'm never going to point this firearm at anyone, unless it's life or death situation. I'm never going to point this firearm at anyone, even if I think the firearm's safe. Safety's on, which this Glock does not have a safety, or doesn't have a mechanical button safety. But this is another thing my dad drove into me. It's related to this point, is that a safety is a mechanical device that can fail. So yes, use a safety if you have one, if it's appropriate at the time. But just remember, a safety is not an excuse for poor firearm handling. So just be mindful that never point it at anything you're not willing to shoot, not willing to destroy. And number 2, so don't point the firearm at anything you don't intend to destroy. Number 2, firearm safety rule is that treat all firearms as if they are loaded, especially when it comes to handling. I'm just going to always treat it like it's loaded. Like, I know it's unloaded. I've made it safe, but if you were here in the room, I'm not going to sweep the gun just kind of demonstrating, and I'm not going to do that. Because I'm going to treat this as if it's loaded. Even if I'm dry firing and I know it's unloaded, I'm still not going to point it at anything else. This is a statistic without the numbers with it, but what was always alarming to me as a young teenager looking at those statistics from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, I'm sure all states do these, but it was alarming. Statistic is that the majority of people that were injured from an accidental discharge of a firearm, it happened from, are you ready for this? It happened from an unloaded firearm. I mean, obviously it wasn't unloaded, but they were convinced it was unloaded. And they are just as shocked, and I think genuinely so, that this accident could have happened. And perhaps they were doing something that they shouldn't have. They were treating it like it was unloaded, even though it was loaded. It could happen a lot of ways, especially for an inexperienced shooter, is that perhaps this is an unloaded magazine, but perhaps you're like, I want to make this firearm safe, and so you remove the magazine, and it's great, but if you had one in the chamber, it's still in the chamber. So you have to make sure that there's nothing in there, that it is completely empty. And so there's a number of other ways, but just you have to make sure that that firearm is unloaded if you think it's unloaded, but still you're going to treat it as if it is loaded. Number 3 is that keep your finger off of the trigger until you're on target and ready to press that trigger. So just get used to, if you pick up a firearm, don't just pick it up and put your finger there. And worse yet, I see some people have their finger on the trigger and they go to charge the firearm and their finger's on the trigger. Guess what happens? If it loads around, it can very easily go off. You've probably heard that click. And if that's pointed at your leg or at someone else when you're doing that, so find a place that is comfortable for you, that's up on the side, that's out of that trigger guard until you're on target and ready to press the trigger. So don't let it ever go there. And then finally, number 4 is always be aware of your target and what's beyond your target. So is what I'm going to shooting, could there be a ricochet? Am I shooting against metal? What am I shooting against? What could happen when it hits that target? So be mindful of that. Be mindful of what's beyond your target. Let's say you've got approval, some landowner, to go out to their pasture, set up a target and practice with your new firearm. You're so excited about it. You run out there, put a box out, put your target on it, and you're getting ready to shoot. What happens when that bullet goes through that cardboard box? Where does it go from there? Well, it's probably just going to go into the ground. Well, what if it ricochets? Is it going to hit a car, individual, house, building, livestock? So just be aware that bullets can travel for quite some time, even off of a ricochet. Especially, I've found more often than not, shooting a firearm on a box that's just sitting on the ground, very, 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 very prone to ricochet. Shooting at water from standing or even laying, sitting position, very highly likely to have a ricochet. So what is beyond that target? All right, so that is all of them. Video is already probably way longer than I intended for it to be, but I think my conscience is now clear. And I want your firearm purchase or a gift or whatever you're getting, I want it to be a great thing for you. I want your home and you to be safe. And probably above all, not one of the rules, but if you have a question, you don't know something, ask somebody that's experienced in firearms. Come ask somebody that you know. Or if you're at the range and you're by yourself, you're with a new firearm, you're a new shooter, it malfunctions in some way, you don't even know what to call it, but you just don't know how to safely clear it, just don't go swinging the firearm around and ask for help. Just lay it back on the table, pointed down range. Ask somebody next to you, ask the range officer, whoever's there. Say, hey, I'm a new shooter, this happened, I don't even know what to call it, but can you help me and show me how to make it safe again? Most experienced shooters love, number one, that somebody's being safe, and two, we love to educate people. We want you to be safe with your firearm. So again, ask questions if you have them. If you think of anything, for those of you that know me, you can hit me up, text me, call me, shoot me a message on Facebook, and I'd be glad to help you if I can. But be safe and enjoy shooting.